Well, going right back to the mid-1970s, I was a high school music teacher in New Zealand, and I also joined a band for the first time. And I was already composing music of a slightly more art music variety, but I started trying to dabble with pop music and rock music in particular, and gradually started to try and write pieces which actually combined my interest in classical music with my interest in pop music. And the end effect was microjazz. One of the things that's characteristic of microjazz, I think, is that it's written down very precisely as though it's classical repertoire, but it has the groove of pop and jazz and rock. And so I amassed a body of material which I came to Britain with in 1977. And before long, I was actually writing some arrangements for Universal Edition in London. And the education manager one day said to me, "Chris, I'd like you to write some graded pieces in popular styles." And I was at the Edinburgh Festival that year, playing in a band, and I wrote about 40 pieces across quite a short time period. And he then left the company. And so I had the pieces, but the person who was interested in getting them wasn't there anymore. So I just kept them. And eventually, about perhaps a year later, I made contact with Boosey and Hawkes through having taught somebody the piano who got a job there. And the person who was their education specialist, if you like, saw these pieces, really liked them, and decided to call them Microjazz. And I realized he called them Microjazz because Boosey and Hawkes also published Microcosmos of Bartók. And the idea of having a series of music for children, if you like, with the word micro at the front, but with the word jazz or pop or rock or whatever, seemed to be quite a nice starting point. The key figures in the advent of the Microjazz series were Dennis Parker, who was the education manager for Universal Edition way back in the, I suppose, late 70s, early 80s. He and his wife Molly used to travel around the country, around Great Britain, doing workshops on educational music, and they sold quite large numbers of copies of books as a result, including a number of Christmas books, which he'd asked me to write. So he was the first person, and he also asked me to write the series in the sense of a concept, i.e. graded pieces in popular styles. The second key figure was Judy Harries, who was somebody who I taught the piano to at York University. She was an undergraduate, and she got a job at Boosey and Hawkes, and her boss, the third figure in this equation, was Rex Billingham. And she brought me to him with these graded pieces in popular styles, which I had tucked away in a bottom drawer, and I brought them along, played some of them to him, and he immediately could see the potential and decided to publish them as Microjazz. He also commissioned covers from a contemporary French artist, so they looked very different from anything else that was on the market at the time. And so the series was marketed well as being a new idea, if you like. The secrets of Microjazz's popularity and longevity after 40 years, I think, were there from the beginning. One of them is that the music's written down very precisely so that classical teachers feel quite comfortable when they look at it. They think, oh yes, articulation, fingering, pedaling, etc. There's lots of things there to hang on to if you're from a classical tradition. The second thing is when children hear the pieces, they like the sound of them. I somehow managed to bottle certain styles in my own way, if you like, and children play them and you think, I know what to do with this. I think that's quite a common thing I've found, is that children in many countries, they play a piece like Intercity Stomp from Microjazz Collection 2 and immediately think, I know how this is supposed to go. So it kind of leads you by sound, if you like, in the way you're supposed to be going. But at the same time, it's got this kind of overarching concept of written down very precisely so that the teacher's happy, but so is the student. If students are learning something from Microjazz, I have a number of tips for them. One of them is follow the music exactly. I mean, try and do it as closely as you can. Articulation, fingering, pedaling, everything, dynamics. If something's marked pianissimo, play pianissimo. If it's marked double forte, play double forte. In other words, try to go very, very accurately by the score. Secondly, it's quite a good idea to listen to how the piece should sound from a composer performance, and there are lots of those available on various digital platforms, or from a concert pianist performance. Ian Farrington, a very fine British pianist, has recorded all of the Microjazz books, including the collections 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And they're available on all digital platforms as well. And I love his playing, and he gives a kind of complete concert pianist perspective. I'm slightly a pop player, so you might say I tend to do things in a particular way, but I like the fact that he's pulling on other traditions in his interpretations, but I still think he's pulling on those traditions correctly. So that's a second thing. And the third thing is look at YouTube. I have a YouTube channel called Christopher Microjazz, and the Microjazz books are all on YouTube with performances by the composer and some teaching notes embedded in the videos as well. So there's another way of doing it. So listen and look, and then look closely at the score. And I think you'll also find it useful to listen to the backing tracks and even try and play the pieces with the backing tracks. They're available at more than one speed most of the time, and you can actually get a feel for the style from hearing those backing tracks, as well as having something which is keeping you very well in time.